Hello everyone, this is BeatScribe. We're going to take a look today at how to use the Midi to UGE converter to take one of your own compositions or a Midi you got off the internet, clean it up and import it into the huge format for use in your Game Boy project. So I have a short song that I've mocked up. Here's a mocked up version of it using Plog chip sounds, so you get the idea of how it will sound as a finished product. You can start with just a Midi, but I wanted to show you what we're going to be doing. So we're going to let this play. So, fairly simple song there, and it has been designed to be used with the Game Boy, so it doesn't have too many channels or anything like that. So let's take a look at the Midi. That's our first step, is to figure out what we need to do with it. Now I'm using Logic Pro, but you could do this in Reaper, Cubase, or any other program that lets you import a Midi, move things around, and export back to Midi. There's no real tool you have to use for this section of it. So we're going to open up the Midi, and here it is. So this is, of course, just use default instruments in Logic Pro. So if we play it right now, it's going to sound pretty bad, just to give you a very small preview of that. So everything got converted into pianos, and it sounds pretty chaotic, especially because of the drums. So this is where you kind of have to use your imagination and think about what it's going to sound like when it's done. The first thing we want to do is figure out what channels are going to go where. As you know, the Game Boy has 4 channels, 2 duty channels, 1 wave, and 1 noise. So what I like to do is make at the top of my Midi 4 new tracks that will have that final destination. And that way it gives us kind of an area to stage everything. So I'm going to add new tracks. You could do this in whatever program you have. There'll be some way to add new tracks. I'm going to make 4 new Midi tracks. It wants to put a default instrument. I just use this little 8-bit thing called computer, but you could keep it a piano or whatever you want. We're not really going to be caring about how it sounds in here. So now I got my 4 tracks. I'm going to name them. In Logic Pro, you just double click to name them, but there's different ways depending on your tool. So our final goal is to move all this stuff up here into a way that makes sense, and then to perform a few more small things that will be necessary for the Midi to huge converter to properly convert it without any surprises. And we'll talk about each step of that. So let's talk about what's what in our song. This first track here, the names of these came from a tool that I built them in. They don't mean anything. They just happen to be the tools I picked. That part is definitely the lead of my song. It's important. I don't want sound effects interrupting it. I want it to be kind of front and center. So I'm going to use Duty 1 for this, because that won't have any sound effects playing on it over the game, and it'll sound nice and clean. So I'm going to put that on Duty 1. I'm going to double click on the Midi to actually look at the notes and see if there's anything else I need to worry about. One of the first things you want to look for is, did you go below octave 3 anywhere? And here you can see we got a couple notes down here that are below octave 3. We don't want any notes below octave 3. Now you could just grab these and move them up a whole octave, but then when you convert, these notes, which should be higher than these notes, are now going to be lower. It's going to sound kind of weird probably, especially for your bass. So I'm going to select all. In Logic Pro, select all is Command A. And then I'm going to drag these up. So this starting note here is G3. I'm going to move this up to G4. So now we look through our entire thing. Nothing in the song now for our Duty 1 track goes below C3. So that's really it. We don't have overlapping notes. We don't have chord data. If there was, like here's an example, like let's say that it was like this. That's fine for Midi. That's fine for a piano. It can play that. But our system can't. So you'd want to look for any times there's overlaps like that and delete those overlapping notes like that. All right, so that's it for Duty 1, which is our lead. Let's look at this other next channel. So this part of the song is kind of a backing track for the melody, kind of a orchestral type, classical music runs, you might call them. This is a perfect candidate for Duty Channel 2 because when you have fast notes that play a lot, sound effects will interrupt them, but they come right back on the next note, and it's not that noticeable that something dropped out of the music. Also, the song doesn't depend on this to hold its structure together. It's not the rhythm, it's not the bass or the lead of the song. It contributes to the rhythm, it contributes to the overall feeling, but it's not that important. So Duty 2 would be a perfect place because if sound effects interrupt it, that's acceptable. Not a lot we have to change here either, except as usual, it goes below C3. So we're going to do the same thing again. Grab them all, and I'm going to drag them up. G3. And then move that to Duty 2. We can listen to this. It's going to sound very high-pitched, but you can see that the structure is still there. So make sure we didn't move anything out of place. So coming up next, what's left is the wave channel and the noise channel. And these are two that usually do get the most complicated for conversions. So here it looks like our Midi, for whatever reason, has broken up the wave channel into three things here. When you listen to this, the beginning of the song has some long notes, and then it gets to be this little more quicker changes, and then back to long notes. Now, we obviously don't have channels to put these all separated like this, and there's no reason for them to be either. So the first thing I'm going to do is combine these sections. I'm going to move this up here, and I'm going to move this up here. So now they're all one piece. It doesn't really matter, but if you want to, and it can matter in some systems, like I think it kind of does in Reaper, to use a glue or paste function, they call it, to put these together as one piece. In Logic Pro, I just selected glue, and you hold shift and click them, and they become one piece of MIDI. So now they're all one track. Now here again we have our regular issue of they're well below C3. Of course we want our bass to be low, but we'll talk about that once we get into the huge tracker side, the post conversion, how we fix that up. So grab this, we're going to take it up. So now there's nothing below C3. And lastly, we're going to look at the noise channel, which also gets complicated. So this guy's ready to go. I'm going to drag him up here to wave. If we give it a listen now, it sounds like a very high-pitched version of our song. But it's coming together. Alright, and we saved the worst for last, the noise channel. The noise channel is always the hardest part of conversion, at least for me. To be quite honest, I often just don't do the drums in the conversion, and I just write them myself in Huge Tracker. But if you're not experienced with Huge Tracker, it can be done, and it's not the hardest thing in the world. So let's look at our drum pattern, what we have right now. And right now they're just assigned to pianos. It's not going to sound great, but you get the idea. So what we have going on here is this track is some sort of like hi-hats. In this song I decided just to not have a kick drum. It's not a dance song or anything, it's just background music in the game. So the pattern is kind of kick, kick, snare, kick, kick, snare. So this one is the bass, or what would be the bass or the hi-hat. In this case I'm making it a hi-hat. And then this one is the snare. So together they have this pattern. So what do? Well, first of all, we can't have two tracks. We have to combine them. And in this case, that's fairly simple. I'm going to take this hi-hat track, which starts it out, and I'm going to copy that. In Logic Pro, I clicked C1 to select everything on that note, and then Command-C to copy it. And then I'm going to go over to this other one by placing the cursor there. And this is different in different digital audio workstations, but you'll get the idea. Pasting Command-V in Logic Pro. And it's kind of spaced out, but as you can see, I did do it right. There we have our hi-hats followed by our snare. So now we have to think about, this is going to be in Huge Tracker, where the noise channel only sounds like drums when you go pretty high up. And obviously too, we can't have things below C3, even there. So I'm going to take my hi-hat ones and I'm going to move them up. Doesn't have to be super exact, this part. I like to put them around the 5th octave. And then the same for my snare. I don't want it to be too low. But again, you're going to see it doesn't have to be too exact. It just has to be separated enough that the converter doesn't try to make the notes the same because they're too high or too low. And then you can take it from there to convert them. So I'm going to put this like, say, C5. So now we're going to delete this extra track that I copied from. And now this guy's ready to go up here into our noise channel. So it still doesn't sound too great if we play it. That's okay. I'm just going to show you briefly. Because obviously this is meant to be noise, not notes. And that's okay. So this is basically done. We're going to clean up our MIDI. I'm going to delete these extra channels that came with it. You'll see this little CH1. By default, they were all sort of mapped to one MIDI channel. Sometimes that throws off the converter, so you wouldn't want to just do the fix-ups here. That's why I like to make new ones that don't have any data that came along with the MIDI. So I'm just going to delete these. You just push delete when you highlight them in Logic Pro. And there's our finished MIDI. Now we're going to export that to a MIDI. We're going to export this using MIDI to Huge, and then we'll see how it all works in Huge Tracker. In Logic Pro, I just go to Export. All MIDI tracks as a MIDI file. And I'm going to call this Boss M2 MIDI. Boss Mid was my original. This is just to tell me it's for MIDI to Huge. And I'm going to save that. And that's going to do it for part 1 of this video. Check out part 2 to see the rest of the conversion.